Yeah, hi everybody. Welcome to Untitled Chat this week. Sorry for the technical delay. This week we have joining us Mr. Stephenson MBE, social worker, community activist, and equality campaigner. He's joining us tonight to discuss his new book, Unbeaten Innings, and his groundbreaking work in Luton, Bedford, Birmingham, Bristol, and beyond. He's also my bigger brother.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Can I just clarify something before we start? I wasn't actually the founder of the Starlight Youth Club. Just would like to say I was pivotal in reopening the club in June 1980. What had happened, the first leader of the club was Arthur Warren. And when the club was based at Beach Hill, the club was then moved to Inkerman Street by Animal Candicor. I was actually on the management committee at the time, but the club eventually closed in 1979, and I lobbied Bedfordshire County Council for about 6 months, supported by Mrs. Valby Taylor, Annabelle Candicor, and Curla and Harry Bruce. I then got an empty shell of a building in June 1980. There was nothing in the building. It was very difficult at the time. I had about 150 young people, most of them aspiring to be Rastafarians at the time, with no support. In fact, it was the police that actually gave us a pool table in about July 1980. Then I went into a village and I purchased a football table. I remember quite well because I didn't have the money. And this guy said to me, it's £120 and you can pay me £40 pounds. So I paid £340 and we acquire the football table. I then had a law student called Carl Campbell, and he put £10, lent me £10 and I put £15, and we bought a set of table tennis bats and some sweets and bits and pieces, and the Starlight kick-off then. So I'd just like to clarify that whilst I've been pivotal in developing the Luton Carnival, setting up the first Black library in the club, start teaching Black history in 1976, long before Black history started in October 1987 in London. So I was pivotal, but after that, the work was carried on by Bob Baker, Lawrence Palmer, Harry Rose, and Bernie Abbey. So due respect to everyone. But I think my role was crucial because they actually shut down the club and throw away the keys. So I just want to clarify that before we go on. Okay, thank you. But my role was crucial because I started the Luton Carnival. We were only given one truck and a generator. And at the time, the police didn't want the carnival. The council was in opposition to the carnival. And the council said to me and the police, you need to find 12 stewards. I then went to some of the bigger guys in the town who were bouncers at the Sands Club. And it was Des Palmer, my brother Harvey, and Patrick Chambers and people like that. These guys act as the stewards, and they had to put themselves near the roundabout where 50 was to actually steward the day. But what swung it for us, I said to the police that we'll end the carnival at the top of Inkerman Street, where we will disembark with the youths coming straight into the club and into the car park. And that's how the carnival started. Before the Caribbean Carnival, there was a sort of procession, which was just ethnocentric. It was a Luton fair. We weren't involved with it. But what happened in the first year was Harry Bruce, the co-founder, who was from Trinidad, went to London and he got the Grenadian dance troupe to come through the street of Luton, about 30 of them. He got Metro Mount sound system and they played a part. And then we then all gathered at the Starlight. I think about 400 or 500 people in the building, and we had one big dance on the night. It went off peacefully, and from there, the carnival developed. But what happened is that I didn't get a lot of support from a lot of people. A lot of people claimed that they start the carnival and they were involved with the carnival, But they came later when Vauxhall decided to sponsor the carnival. So you got other stalwarts in the town like Mr. Bullock and Mrs. Prophet and other people that came along, and they did an excellent job. But I remember Colin Spalding phoning me one day. I was driving in the countryside, and he phoned me and he said, "Mr. Stephenson, thank you, thank you." And I said, "Why are you thanking me?" And he said, "I just got 175,000 from a grant." And he says to me that he was inspired by my work. And after I left Luton, he started making the costumes at Lee Manor. So I was very pleased to hear that. So that's the issue about the carnival settled, okay? Other people played a major part after that, including Bernie Abbey and others.
Well, we wanted to sort of, you want to sort of just discuss a little bit about the book, and the beginnings from growing up in Jamaica, ending up in, and then some of the stuff.
Well, the book is 207 pages long. The reviews has been excellent. The first person that reviewed the book was actually an English gentleman called Paul Crofts, who was the former director of Northamptonshire Race Equality Council. And his comments were, it was an excellent book, and he was very pleased with the research that was done. The second person was a social worker, another excellent review. And the last review was done by Veron Graham, and it's on the Voice Online. And Veron was actually one of my social work cases. Veron told me that when I was in Birmingham, I took him to Aston Villa and he met some of the footballers. And he said, after I left Birmingham, because of the influence by myself, he went on to become a journalist. So there's been 3 or 4 years, but in terms of the period, I was born in Kingston. I was born on Human Rights Day. The book, Unbeaten, is not just about cricket. It has a double meaning. When a batsman becomes 100 not out, it is said that he played an unbeaten innings. I've been involved in the race equality field for over 40 years, so I feel I'm also unbeaten. I've worked not only in Luton, I've been in Bedford, Birmingham, Northampton, Milton Keynes, and so on. I was involved in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. Part of my role was to implement the 70 recommendations from the Macpherson report. This was very difficult because I had to do this in a conservative council. I was in the chief executive of Swindon Borough Council, and it was like one man fighting against 8,000 staff. Whilst I was welcome as an individual and as a person, my role was not welcome. So it was an uphill struggle implementing the report. When I went to Birmingham to the inquiry, I always remember the day because I was sitting at the front and I was actually on Central Television all day. But the situation was that you had the community on one side and the police on one side. And Neville Lawrence actually broke down and started crying, and we had to went to speak to him and sort of tell him that we are here to support him. So that was one of my major things I did outside Luton. In the book, I also talk about the period when I was the director of the Race Equality and Human Rights Service in Bristol. I also went on to manage the iconic Malcolm X Center in Bristol, where I actually saved it from closure. I developed an action plan and I wrote a business plan. That was Bristol. Birmingham was one of the most interesting places I've worked because what happened in Birmingham, when I got there, there was about 3,300 Black social workers, but most of them were unqualified and they weren't treated very well. So I had to support them. But what really took place in Birmingham was that they sacked a Black woman called, I won't call her name, but they sacked this Black woman for a very trivial reason. So we actually marched through the street. It was a legitimate march, but I came on radio and criticized Birmingham equal ops policy. So Birmingham decided that they weren't going to promote me. So I applied for this job and I had four years experience. And this Asian woman who had 18 months experience and whom I was supporting were given the job. I didn't have any problem with her, but later a white manager tipped me off to say that management think you are too close to the black community, which is a laugh. How can you not be close to your community? But I think what upset them was I was working with Steve Batchelor, who was antagonizing the council. I was also involved in Hurricane Gilbert, which raised £25,000. It was the largest sum to be raised in the UK. I was a coordinator. So management saw me in the local papers and they feel that, I was someone who was a threat. I was also involved in the fostering campaign, and we was trying to recruit more Black Nation foster carers at the time. I remember bringing Ricky Hill, my old friend, to Birmingham for the first campaign. So that's sort of some of the things I've done. A lot of people tend to talk about linking me with cricket. I've done a lot with cricket, and I'll just give you one example. In 1994, I went to the poorest club in Kingston, and I gave them £1,000 worth of gears. I did not know that there was a boy there called Chris Scale, the Universal boss. Chris was there, and Chris actually got a bat. So when he heard it, he said he couldn't believe that I was the person that bought the gears there. So probably there's a bit of luck on my part. And then Stephanie Taylor, the West Indian captain, told me that she got one of my Gunnermore boots. I sent 50 boots to Jamaica one time, and they said after the boots were shared out to the men's team, she got one of the boots. But most importantly with the cricket, the last team that came here had 5 players from Jamaica, and I actually helped 4 of them when they were in the under-19s. That's going back to about 2009. So in terms of the cricket, yes, I made a major contribution there. I was also involved in the tribute to the pioneers of Black British football. When I worked with Cyril Regis, we had 8 England players at that tribute. We had 30 players in all. This was in Birmingham. This was a very groundbreaking event, but unfortunately, the major sports organization, I won't call the name, but they wouldn't support me at all because this was a Black event for Black players. And whilst it was groundbreaking, I didn't receive any support at all from the mainstream. It was only Brendan Batson from the PFA and Gordon Taylor that gave me £3,000. And Paulette Simpson, who is now director of The Voice, she also sponsored the event. She was the only Black organization that sponsored the event. She was working for National Commercial Bank at the time. But I'm hoping that this become a documentary because it was a very important development, honoring these players at the time. I can call some of the names: Luther Blissett, Garth Crooks, Ricky Hill, Paul Elliott, Bob Hazel, Mark Walters. They were all there. There was one player that came from South Africa. He was the first Black professional footballer in the world from South Africa called Steve Marconi, and he came over with another player who came from Canada. And we flown in Clyde Best, who was one of the first Black players, played for West Ham. And we flown in Clyde Best from Bermuda. So I'm hoping that Paul Elliott is looking at it at the moment to turn this into a documentary, because behind the scenes, there was a lot of racism. Nobody wanted a Black man to put on an event just for Black players. But I was only one person. There's no way I could have found funding to actually do a tribute to all the players in England. But it's one of the events that I'm hoping that will be turned into a documentary.
When you took over Starlight Youth Club, or you created Starlight Youth Club, was you set up as an organization?
No,
whether social enterprise or whatever type of community organized.
No, those never exist at the time.
Carry on.
What it was, I was on the management committee at Starlight Youth Club. So when Hannibal Kandikor was leaving town, he wanted people who, was Black conscious and who could help the youngsters. So I, was on the management committee. And while I was there, I was doing voluntary work. And that's when I started to teach what we call Black Studies in 1976. Because when I came to England,
Yeah.
I'd ask the question, or is it you have a group of black young people born here in the mid-60s and happen to be at the bottom of the pile in British society? While I was at the club, I was also doing my social work training, and my thesis was Black Youth and Employment. I work at Broadwater Farm in Tottenham, and I work at the Stonebridge Bus Garage. While I was doing my studies, these things came up, but there was no social enterprise at the time. In fact, the club was saved by the sound system, because due respect to the Luton sound system, and Lawrence Palmer might be listening with Gemini and Phoenix and Sax with Crucial Robbie at the time. But when the two sound system from Luton used to play, at the end of the night, Beanie Bernard used to bring about £50 and give to me. And one day, Francis Reed, who was my senior member, he said to me, there's a sound called Fat Man in London. But brought Fat Man up, told Fat Man what the problem was. We kept the dance, and we raised about £400. So I was able to go down to Alma Street on the Monday morning to pay the rent at the co-op. Then I told Light Coxon what was happening. And Light came with Duffer Sirey, Smiley Culture, and Black Dread. And we also made some more money. So those two sound systems actually helped to save the Starlight Youth Club, because what I then do, 1 week or 1 month, I let Gemini play with Coxon. Then I let Phoenix play with I can't remember this. It was Frontline, Saxon, Shaka, Jungleman. Those were the sound system that was coming to the club. There was also the white guy. What's the name of the white DJ? Can't remember his name. Still around. David Rodigan. It was people like that. But eventually we had Brigadier Jerry. Brigadier Jerry came to the club. And we made £1,600 when Brigadier Jerry came. So we paid the rent for the year and was able to help out buy books for the club and so on. Then Jack Ruby also came. So in a sense, I've always said to the youngsters, plan A is education, plan B is music and sports. But it's ironical that I've said that when it's a sound system that actually saved the Starlight Youth Club from closure. Because what was happening, I was being monitored on a monthly basis. I had to produce income and expenditure. At the time, I wasn't even being paid. I was given sessional rate. So I was never a professional paid youth worker at the time. I did voluntary for 4 years, and then after that was sessional.
Okay.
Lawrence Palmer, to his credit, became the first Black era youth officer in the town, and enough respect to Lawrence for that. But I was only pivotal with most of the things that I did. I also started community matches with the police. We played the police in football and cricket, because if people remember, I was also the chairman of Ebony Starlight Football Club with Noel Lewis. But one of the issues there, at the time we were being harassed by the police, and I had a situation one Saturday morning that I'm still upset to this day about. I won't call the name of the player, but we got into the training room and the players changed, and I noticed one of the guys' back was really bruised. And I said to him, what happened? And he said the police actually pulled him from the car park at the police station into the cells. So we had this situation where we had the SUS law and we had a lot of harassment at the time. So I used to spend a lot of Friday and Saturday night down the cells, making sure that the boys were all right, and leave them there, and then I go back on Sunday morning to look at them. So it was not a nice period. And Bill Clifton Thompson says to me, if I remember the 2 cigarettes and the pound, and I said, oh, because what happened with a situation where 13 of the boys took Pastor Blake van and went to Bedford. One of them had a dispute with his girlfriend, and they wrecked this house. And in England, if you wreck a council house, that's criminal damage. Once you wreck property, you're in trouble. So the boys were remanded to Ashford Remand Centre in London. But in those days, I was in the courtwork team in Bedford. So I was able to go down the cells, and I gave each of them 2 cigarettes and a pound. You couldn't do that in this time. They wouldn't accept that at all. But that's one of the things that happened. during the period I was there. It wasn't an easy time at all because most of the youngsters was aspiring to be Rastafarians. The adults in the town wasn't supporting me. A lot of people who claim, that they'd done this for the Starlight and they done that. When I got back to the club in June 1980, I didn't see any of these people. It was Francis Reed and people like Carl Campbell. Lawrence Palmer was around at the time with the sound system. Most of the people who later mentioned that they support me, I didn't see any support for them. In fact, they were saying to me that the youngsters are too violent and we don't want anything to do with them. So it wasn't a nice period at all. After the uprisings, I spent 3 days in the courts. 102 youngsters were locked up, and it took a long time to actually sort things out before we got back to normal. So it was a very difficult period, but I know that I have left the town a long time now, but whenever I come back, I'm greeted like a king by most of these people that remember the period. I must admit, every time I've been down there and I walk down Parry Park, even the Asian shopkeepers stop me and speak to me. So I must have done something positive during the period that I was there. The police chief constable also gave me a testimonial for my work. He told me that he couldn't have given me a commendation because I wasn't a police officer. But I am proud of the things I did. I remember another occasion in Berry Park when one of the youngsters put some of his money in a pool table and the balls didn't come out, so they start wrecking the place. I went in to stop them and the police came and arrested me. Just as they were going to take me away, a councillor came along, Councillor Ann, and Councillor Ann said to the sergeant, "But you're arresting the man who's making the peace," so they let me go. But the whole of that period was very difficult. Ebony was a black football club. Ebony was made welcome. There was a lot of harassment. The police was all watching us when we were playing. Another thing they did with Ebony was that they asked, why do we have to have a black football club? My answer was that you had Celtic, who was Scottish. You had Sacred Heart, who was Catholic. That wasn't a problem. But people object to having an all-black football club. But you remember, guys, that the black football club and the cricket club were formed for the same reasons the black churches were formed. When guys played for these white teams, football and cricket, their medals were pushed through the letterbox. They were invited to the dinner or the presentation because these guys that they were playing didn't want the black guys to mix with their wives or partner at the time. So rejection, breed rejection. We started our churches in our front room. We started the cricket clubs and football clubs in our front room. But when they were established and we were strong, people were saying we're not integrating. But that wasn't our fault. We was only reacting to the way we were treated. And I was saying to this guy in Spain the other day, it was on about black people can be just as racist as white people. And I said, no, that's rubbish. Racism is prejudice plus power. That's the definition. And we never had the power. And from me and my own experience, 95% at the time when there is issues, it's black people reacting to the way they've been treated. But when we react, they say we are aggressive and they blame the victim. So that's my experience. I don't know if the youngsters nowadays, behave in a more racist way or a more aggressive way, but I know during the period, 70s, 80s, 90s, up to 2000, a lot of times it was people who feel threatened by us, challenge us, and then we react.
Steve, I mean, you've been around England really then, Luton, Bedfordshire, Bristol, Birmingham. What was the toughest area that you was in?
I think Isleworth and St. Paul's, because those areas are heavily policed and there's a lot of issues in those areas. For example, the period I was in St. Paul's, they were planning to close down the Malcolm X Centre, and that was a tough one. When the BBC came to interview me, I just want to say something. As soon as people mentioned closing down the Malcolm X, and I put this in my book, people saying it's racism, but gentlemen, there's something that we have to do. It's not everything got to do with race. We also have to get our house in order as a people. Successive managers went into the Malcolm X Centre and they tore down that place. A really iconic center. You had some of the biggest reggae stars come there. Jesse Jackson came there. But what happened, successive people went into that place and helped themselves. And when I was there, an 80-year-old woman came and she said, Mr. Stephenson, you're the first manager that have banked all the money, and you're the first manager I've stolen the money from the center. And I laugh and I says to her, Madam, I said, if I was stealing money, I'd thief maybe 100 million. I said, when I go to prison, all the prisoners would stood up and clap me. I said, I want to rob a center like this. And she said to me that you're probably the first one. So the Malcolm X was very difficult because I left it in good condition at the time, but it wasn't an easy place because it's one of the most deprived communities. But what I did do, on a positive note, when I was director of the Race, Equality and Human Rights Service, Marvin Rees, the present mayor, he was in my team and he attended my equalities training. And I sort of mentor him. And he became the mayor. Very likable guy, very, very bright. And I am pleased that he became mayor. I also work with Ayanna Griffiths, who was the CEO. So there was a lot of positive people in Bristol, but it's a very historical place. It's where you had the slave trade and all sorts of things happened there and so on. So that was tough. Answorth was also a very difficult area because it's very, very deprived. I remember a situation for you men where we were recruiting Black and Asian foster carers. The white social workers refused to go into Answorth after the riots. They were scared. So I took off my tie and I went into the Black and White Cafe. And I had some posters and I showed it to some black guys. There was this gang in there and one of them said, oh, boy, some of the children, in the high-rise flat, may have 3 of them, 1 in each flat. And I rebuked him and I said, you shouldn't say that. I said, do you realize that these black children are suffering in care? I said, a lot of them lost their identity because they placed them in what we call transracial placements. They were placed in white families and they lose their identity. So a lot of these children deny the blackness as part of their coping mechanism. So what I had to do is start working with these kids. If they were Rastafarian children, I got someone to make some Rastafarian dolls. If they were Sikh children, we make Sikh dolls. And I had to do black and cultural identity work with them. But it wasn't easy. I became the first black lecturer in Birmingham, and even this was problematic. And it's not about us knocking white people because I had a situation where in July one year, I asked for the examination papers to mark them. And the questions, I'll tell you the questions. Birmingham had a large Rastafarian population. So one of my questions was outline the development of the Rastafarian movement from the 1920s to the present day. And what I was looking for was when Marcus Garvey said, look to the east for there should crown a king because the coming of the redemption is near. And at the time there was issues in Kingston with Bedward and some of the people who was involved with the movement. So a lot of people, students attempt the question, a lot of white students, but the white students were obsessed with cannabis. And I says to them, look, most Rastafarians in Jamaica are shoemakers, small farmers, artisans, musicians. They read the Bible every day. And Rasta is not about cannabis. So that question was set. And the next question was about black children and identity. And I said, all children are the same, but color doesn't matter, discuss. And this was around identity. But unfortunately for me, when I went for the examination papers, I met a black woman at reception. And she said to me, oh, mature student, you can't have the papers. And I turned to her and said, I'm a qualified social worker and I'm also a senior lecturer. The woman said to me, she had never seen a black senior lecturer. So what this woman had done was internalize the institutional racism of the organization because she's never seen a black lecturer before. Another thing that happened here too, and as I said, I've said in the book about being anti-racist, it's not being anti-white, which a lot of people doesn't understand. But we had an incident where Rastafarian mother was going into care. She was going into hospital, and her kids, 2 and 6, were going into foster care. And they went to a Caribbean woman in Lozells. And the woman took a look at those children, 2 and 6, and turned them away and saying she doesn't want any dirty Rastafarian children in her house with locks. This was a black woman. So I went back to her and I says to her, do you realize what you have done? I said, if a white carer had done that, we'd have said they're racist. And we dismiss her. We dismiss her from the project because you can't have it both ways. When a white person do that, we jump on top of them. You see, so you got those things happen where the Rastafarian community is a minority within a minority. And we were discriminating against them. So we have all of these situations. And I will tell you about being anti-racist is not being anti-white. I was in Jamaica in 1994 touring with Bristol West Indian. And my friend Gary Bailey asked me to help 2 white people, 2 English people get the tickets. And I got the tickets and I put them in the judge in the stand to sit down, and they were all right. But in the afternoon, I met 8 white people from the Midlands, and they had come from their hotel in the North Coast, but they wanted to go out in Kingston for the night. So they were looking hotels in New Kingston. They wanted to go to Cuddy's, which is Courtney Walsh Club, my friend club. But this guy was sending them past Stony Hill. And if you know Jamaica, if you go past Stony Hill, no taxi is going to go up there 2 o'clock in the morning. So I helped them to get hotels in New Kingston. Then this guy from Bristol, he says to me, Mr. Stephenson, you're fighting for racial justice all your life. I know you come to Jamaica helping white people. And I turned to him and I said, being anti-racist is not being anti-white. I said, Nelson Mandela did not hate anybody after spending 28 years in prison. And he said, oh, Mr. Stephenson, I didn't do it like that. I always thought that you guys, was fighting white people. I said, no, we have never fought white people. I said, I've shown my humanity to everyone. I work in Bedfordshire with full caseload of white kids, 40 of them. And I show them respect and I help them. In Answorth, when the white social workers was working with black families, they make a lot of mistakes. So it's like we was able to work as qualified social workers with white people, but the white social workers struggle to work with black Caribbean people. They struggle to work with the Muslims and so on. You see, that's why I always talk about anti-racist training and so on.
Yeah, time there was a hard time, for real.
But it was very difficult, very difficult. And even after Macpherson, I trained the Bedfordshire Police. After Macpherson, I trained them after Stephen Lawrence inquiry. But a lot of work been done. I would see something still going backwards.
The question was surrounding Bedford. I remember I met you on Sunday, and you mentioned that there was the racism in Bedford was quite subtle. I wanted to know if you could have given a sort of a description of some of the subtle racism.
No. What happened in Bedford? What happened in Bedford was that I went to the Harper suit once, and the councils were there, and there was a woman that was appointed, and she was look at ethnic minority and look at issues around the Caribbean community and so on. And she was talking, and I got up and I says to her, it's interesting that I was here in 84, I came back 1990, and I said, you are just looking at these issues now. As I made that statement, and because I was working as the principal officer in Northamptonshire, but I was wearing my community hat in Bedford. So when I applied to become the director of the Bedford Race Equality Council, I applied, I was rejected. About 6 months after, someone told me confidentially that I finished first and they didn't give me the job. I then applied for a job at Bedfordshire Health Promotion and I wasn't given the job. Later on, about a year after, a friend of mine, he's died now, told me that they said I was too radical. But what they call radicalism, I call good practice. So yes, Bedford felt threatened by me and the fact that I was always pressing. I was helping people confidentially. I went into that West Indian club, and I was one of the first person that worked for the national lotteries, and I decided to help them. So I applied for 180,000 for them. And the only reason why they never got the money because I thought they had this. They showed me a blueprint, but it didn't pass. You know, it didn't go through the proper channels. So whilst I was there, I was always pressing. But what they didn't like in Bedford, I started teaching Black history there. So in 1992, I had a 6-week course in Bedford and a 6-week course in Luton. The council didn't like it because of what I was saying on the course. But there's a African saying that until the lions, I can't remember the saying now, but I'll come back to it. But until the lions have their own historians, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. So until the lions have their own historian, tales of hunting will always glorify the hunter. And what they were saying, what I was saying is that I was saying about one of the things I taught the people on the course was Eric Williams' book. The great Eric Williams from Trinidad wrote Capitalism and Slavery. And Eric Williams was the first person that made the connection between finance and slavery, because the slave trade and the wealth that Britain generated with the great mansions came from the slave trade. So after slavery, the slave owners were given 20 million compensation. So those things were a bit contentious at the time when I was talking about them in Bedford, because there was a book called Destruction of Black Civilization. There was Capitalism and Slavery. There was Cashmore book, Rasta and Resistance. So I was sort of like outlining some of the issues that we face. I was talking about the great civilizations, like the great civilization developed in Egypt and not the Greece, with some of the great people that came out of there. They talk about Hippocrates, father of medicine, but Hippotep was the father of medicine. And then when you take American history, if you look at, for example, Edison, the first man to reach the North Pole, he wasn't given any credit because Commander Perry lost 9 of his toes before they reached the North Pole. The black man planted the flag. When they got back to America, Commander Perry were given various commissions, and Edison was given a job as a porter. Another well-known one is Matt Edison with the light bulb. Thomas Edison with the light bulb. Nobody talk about Lewis Howard Latimer, who invented the first filament. The obvious one that everybody seems to know about, but not at the time, was Florence Nightingale and Mary C. Cole. That was another good example. You see, so you find that I was ahead of my time and people didn't like it. Teaching Black Studies at the Starlight in 1976, long before Black History Month. That didn't go down well. I developed the first Black resource library at the Starlight Youth Club, but I'll give you all a joke now. The first set of Black books that went into Luton Central Library, I took Mr. Hawkins to London and we bought the books. That was no problem. Barnfield College heard about the books, and a guy called Jonathan, not his real name, asked me to take him to London. And gentlemen, I took this man to London to buy the books, and we burst the corner for going to Brixton, and we were surrounded by police. I asked the police what was happening, and they said, "You two fit the job description of some robbers." So they searched the car top to this white man, white middle class man. He was shaking. He was really shaking. When the police left, he said, "Steve, how did you remain so calm?" And I says to him, "Well, I teach the youths in Luton to remain calm, because you know what would happen. One round move by me and we were put in the back of the van. We've been assaulted and they would charge us." You see, so that was an experience. So there's a lot of little things in Luton that I've done. For example, you all know about Venel John, who danced with Kylie Minogue. Venel was at the youth club, took him to the UK disco dancing. No, what happened? We went to Germany to play cricket as guests at the 2nd Battalion in the Royal Anglia Army. And Ozzy Clark, who was the captain, says to me, "I don't want these boys around. They're a nuisance. Take them with you." So I took the boys to a place called Charlottenburg. When Venel hit that dance floor, all the German people stopped. We came back to England and said, Venel, forget about the cricket and the football, concentrate on the dancing. So he won the UK Disco Dancing Championship, took him to the World Championship in London with Albert Hunter and two other guys. I can't remember the name. Venel came second. We thought he had won it. But our photos was all over Europe at the time. I remember Billy Ocean was there singing. But eventually he was in Pineapple Studios and he met Arlene Phillips. But one day he was practicing and he saw this young girl struggling to dance, and she turned out to be Kylie Minogue. Years after he came to the NEC in Birmingham, I phoned up the NEC and they said he was on stage. He phoned me back and he took me down to meet Kylie Minogue. And when he was in Luton, he started making a lot of money. He met Tina Turner, he met Michael Jackson. But I can say this because it's all in the book, right? So it's not confidential. Venel's father met me in Berry Park in Selburn Road, and he says to me, Mr. Stevens, you need to talk to Venel because Venel is making a lot of money and he's not putting his money to good use. One word I said to Venel, I said, go into property. And Venel did that. And Venel ended up selling a flat in London for how many millions. One of the things I've done with the footballers and the cricketers, I've always said to them, go into property is the safest place for them. Because some of the footballers have become bankrupt. Some of the cricketers have made any money. So that was my advice. So that was another situation where I am very proud of. You know, call himself Venel King. I see Patrick have joined me. Patrick was one of members of the Starlight Youth Club, one of the most outstanding footballers during the period. I remember he took a ball from the halfway line at Stopsley and beat 4 defenders and scored a goal. But unfortunately for Patrick and some of the talent at the time, there was a lot of racism that was around. And these guys could have made the 3rd and 4th divisions, but they weren't given a chance. Welcome, Patrick.
Yes, sir. I mean, give thanks for your experience and the things that you've done for Black people in the community around England and South England. Abdul, do you still want to say something? Do you have a question?
I had something in mind, but the conversation took a turn and it was a long. It was quite. I can't remember what I was going to say because it was a bit. It's a bit. Yeah, because the conversation went into a different direction. I can't remember what I was going to say. I think it was about to do with. I think it was to do with helping other races of people. Like, you know, I think it was about that. It was to do with. I mean, I think it was to do with you talked about you actually invoked Mandela helping, but I mean, as I said, and all this kind of stuff, like, but I mean, we always tend to help everybody when we are at the bottom of the barrel. And I was thinking, is it really? Because we tend to go out of our way to help, even the oppressor, we tend to go out of our way to help as well. It's not that I hate anybody. It's just that, I feel that, we should prioritize a group of people, like, because we're at the bottom of the barrel, like, and
Yes,
so that we should actually help ourselves. Because I mean, as I says, Mandela actually, it hasn't actually helped his people all that much at all, because, I says I read in the news about a white farmer. I think it was to do with the National Party or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but I mean, he was a member of the white race, and he was actually set to poison a lot of Black South Africans. Like, he was making up these potions in order to actually contaminate water and all this kind of heinous acts or whatever. But they caught him anyway. They caught him, and I think he has been sentenced now and everything. I don't know if anybody's actually heard that. He was in New Jersey. What I'm trying to say is that although Mandela's actually, try to, gather people together, black and white and all these kind of other races. People don't actually appreciate that. White people don't appreciate they say they love Mandela and all this kind of stuff, but in a singular sense, they probably love him. But that's not really love at all, is it? It's patronizing. It's patronizing to say that people love Mandela. They don't really love him. If they loved him, they would like his people. They would like his people too, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Okay, boss. I sort of understand where you're coming from, but sometimes it's the circumstances and the context that we find ourselves in. But obviously, I always prioritize my own community. But as a social worker by profession, I have to show my humanity towards everyone. So, but I know where you're coming from. But at the same time, hate doesn't breed hate. And, we are different sort of people, you see. But I know like Mandela and Martin Luther King is looked at differently from the way they look at Malcolm X and people like that. Because Malcolm X was a segregationist, Martin Luther King was an integrationist, but in a way, all of them played an important part, at different times, so it's the way we look at history. But the main thing anyway for me is education. That's the one I've jumped out. Once you're educated and nobody can stop you, because one of the reasons I've been able to do so much and speak out is because I was a qualified social worker from 1984. So when I went into the equalities field, what they usually do, they cut my post a lot because I was always challenging people. And what they do, they cut my posts, and they used to do it when they cut in the post of 100 people, and they cut mine, so I can't say that racism. But because I'm a qualified social worker, I always be able to get back into social work. Because when I lost my job in Northamptonshire, it was something simple, and it's in the book. All it was, a black social worker went to a family, foster carer, and she heard the man said, "Come on, nigger, come on, nigger." And she said, "Who are you calling a nigger?" And it was a dog. And we had a meeting about it, and the assistant director said they would change the name, but they didn't change the name. So this woman took the case to tribunal. She had lost weight. I was off sick at the time, and the council was happy that I wasn't being able to come to court. But what I did, I had a whiplash injury, and I went to my doctor and I said, the tribunal is in Bedford, near me. And I went with my collar in that courtroom, tribunal setting in Bedford. And the way I swung the case for the woman, the assistant director was lying, and I asked to swear on the Bible. And I heard that the chairman was so impressed. And this person won the case. You see, so all I'm saying is that at different times, right, and in different circumstances, I have stand up and count for what I believe in. And every town that I've been in, I've made a contribution to the Black community. Sometimes you end up helping white people in that process. But at the end of the day, we are all human beings. And while I prioritize our own people, God help who help themselves. And I must admit, sometimes our communities, they have let me down sometimes too. You are trying to work for them. And even when you're trying to work for them, some of them is saying I'm too radical. So sometimes you get a bit confused about why you bother. But at the same time, they said those who know better do better. And I will continue to do what I am doing wherever I go. At the moment, I've got several cases. I've got immigration cases that I'm dealing with. I'll tell you about one of them. It's a woman who had a situation where she was in a car with two men. They jump out and they left the car full of cannabis. She was remanded and they revoke her leave to remain, but she's got a child who is insulin dependent. So what I've done, I've used the Human Rights Act, Article 3 of the Act, Inhumane and Degrading Treatment, Article 8, Right to Family Life, wrote to the solicitor, quote the Race Relation Act, quote the Borders Act, use the Children Act 1989, because a lot of people don't even understand some of the legislation. The Children Act 1989, Section 25(2)(c) said you must take race, religion, language, and culture into account when you place a child. A lot of people doesn't understand the legislation. So I'm working on this case at the moment. I also got a call from somebody who I help with Windrush. This is only a joke, but I want you to guess. Can anybody tell me what is Windrush compensation?
Sorry, can you say that again, please, Steve?
I was talking about immigration, Windrush. So I helped somebody with a Windrush case and he got his compensation. I'm just saying, the gentleman bought a BMW. Yeah. So in terms of Luton too, I've been involved in casework in Luton, but I don't talk about those because they're confidential. So the confidential work, I don't talk about them. But one of the sad things about Windrush is that when you're advising people, you're advising, and then after a time they go quiet. When black people go quiet, that's when you know they get the money. When they go quiet.
All right.
I helped a guy fought up the case of the police brutality. And I helped the guy. And then after, I never heard from him for about 3 months. When I catch up with him, he got £10,000.
All right.
He never even buy me a drink.
Oh gosh. Rude.
So sometimes you're working with people, whether it be Windrush or harassment, and they accept the work and you help them. But I notice sometimes they just go quiet on you, and when they go quiet, I know they've been paid out. But that's life.
Yeah, what you said earlier was poignant when you said being anti-racist isn't being anti-white. That's a very poignant phrase still.
So my first question is, I don't know if you, like, my mom experienced racism. She came over, I think, maybe in the 60s, late 60s, I think. Just a question, if you did experience racism when you came to this country, was your experience different because you had a lighter tone of black? Because a lot of people wouldn't have understood that. Were people questioning your skin tone? Did you feel any indifference based on that? That's just my first question.
Well, that one would be for another day. But unfortunately, we got people who are bleaching them skin, and that happens in Jamaica and elsewhere. But that come out of slavery and colonialism. Because there's a period during the slave trade where you had the white master at the top, the Creole or mixed heritage people in the middle, and the Africans at the bottom. But unfortunately, some of our people still aspire to want to be light or want to be clear skin. And it's really sad, that is. Really sad. But it does happen. But racism, anywhere you meet it. And what you guys must realize, what causing all the problem is the term institutional racism. Because have you anybody studied the situation with the Race Disparity Commission, Tony Sewell, and what he wrote? Race Disparity Commission, April 2020. You remember what happened there?
Well, basically, the majority of the black community are not really happy with him of what he wrote, because basically the Tony Sewell was saying that there isn't any institutional racism in Britain, isn't it? That's what is his main.
Yes, but I will call the definition. Let me call the definition for you. I think I remember it without looking. Institutional racism is the collective failure of an organization to provide appropriate service to people because of their culture, and origin. It can be seen or dictated in attitudes and behavior, which lead to unwitting prejudice, thoughtlessness, and discrimination. That's basically what it says. And none of the public bodies wanted to accept the Macpherson definition. When I met Macpherson, they thought that Macpherson was going to collude with the police because he was in the House of Lords. But what he said, there's nothing about one bad apple being the bunch. He talked about the canteen culture in the police force. So Macpherson's gave them a hammering. They wouldn't accept the definition. And that's what have created a lot of problems, because It's not just individual racism. There's also not just institutional racism. There's also individual racism. But a lot of people hide behind, in this country, we talk a lot about equality and diversity. And there's 9 protected characteristics in the Equality Act. You got age, gender, LGBT, disability, and so on. But I will leave you guys with, remember, Black people cover at least, got multiple identities. So you could have a Black, elderly, disabled woman who's a member of a Pentecostalist church. So that covers 5 strands in the Equality Act. So we got multiple identities. So this thing that I've created a problem is the fact that none of the public bodies want to accept institutional racism. They all said they're not institutionally racist. But time and time again, they have shown Windrush, the Wendy Williams report. In my book, Wendy Williams was forced to take the bit out about institutional racism. And she sort of phrased things another way. But in my book, I said that Williams made overtones of the famous definition of institutional racism. But you need to read my book, there's a chapter just on Windrush in the book. Because my other book was called Arrival, Life in a Second Homeland. This was in Northamptonshire at ACES Center. I interviewed 30 Caribbean elders in 1998. They were all part of the Windrush generation. The term Windrush was not being used at the time. But this book covers a lot of the stories. And your story is my story. Your parents' story is my story. So the stories are very similar. But at the end of the day, we can't give up because it's this second generation. The first generation, Windrush, they turned the other cheek. It's our generation, the second generation, that have made the difference. People like Patrick Markland in Luton and Lana and others who've been fighting, you see, have made a difference. Now you got the third generation. The only thing I'm disappointed about, and I hope nobody take offense, but I met some people born in Britain who is in their 50s, and they're not very conscious and that they're not very aware. I don't know what happened during the schooling, if the culture will knock out of them. I'm not sure what happened, but I'm really disappointed that you have groups of people who just take the colorblind approach, and they're afraid because remember, race is still a taboo subject in this society.
What I've sort of experienced from my perspective and coming from a sort of generation, say under sort of Skipper's generation, maybe a generation down, maybe actually, is that people of my generation and my experience, I think, are more so prejudiced. I think prejudicism, if that's a word, is more prevalent in society than racism. And I just want to just distinguish my opinion of my opinion of both. And my opinion on prejudice is someone who bases their opinion and inflicts a decision based on the color of your skin. Now, a racist to me is somebody who doesn't like you because of the color of your skin. So I don't necessarily think that everybody necessarily doesn't like black people as they hate them in some kind of way, or they dislike them in some kind of way. I just think that they prejudge them based on their lack of cultural knowledge and education. And I'll give you an example of that. I've got a Romanian friend, and in the back of my mind, I associate Romanians with the people who are outside the train station with all the gold in their teeth, with all these things wrapping them, asking for money, and the Romanians that are teething out of people's this and but that's not Romanian people. But am I going to go out of my way to learn about Romanian people? But unfortunately, due to learned behavior and experiences, I view Romanian people in that way. And we kind of have to understand that unless we change as people and change that perception in some way, like stop being idiots on Go Compare adverts and think that just because black people are on TV now, that Black Lives Matter all of a sudden, like it's not happening. Black lives are not happening in the boardrooms. We're not pushing our children into education. It's all about media and sport. Do you understand? So I think that is why we're prejudged, because we're not seen in society as anything but media, sport. Yeah, oh, black guys do this, don't they? So I'm in tech, yeah, and environmental tech. Trying to break into that world, I'm so unrepresented that people I don't think they believe what I'm saying. And it's causing me now imposter syndrome. But that's just because we're so underrepresented in tech and in sustainability. but that's not my fault. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So just getting back to it, just my opinion is I believe that people are more prejudiced in society than they are actually racist in this day and age. And thank you.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. But everybody can be prejudiced, but they don't discriminate.
Can I ask a question, please? Where do you purchase your book from?
My book, my sister Arlene, I've got some books in Luton, Arlene Stephenson.
I know Arlene.
It's an ANSIB publication. It's in Oil's bookshop. It's in Gardner's. I've heard it's in a lot of places, but I prefer people to read a book because people are phoning me all the time and asking me about Starlight. They're asking me about Ebony. They're asking me about various things. But I think people should try and read the book, and then when they read the book, then I can have debates. It's on Amazon ANSIB Publications.
Okay, yeah, Amazon, yeah.
FOYLES, Files Bookshop. They got 7 bookstores. It's in Gardner's, and I heard it's in quite a few other places.
How many books is it? Sorry, is it one book you've written?
I've written 2 books. I've written Cold Arrival, Life in a Second Homeland in 1998, and that's about the Windrush generation.
Right,
so that's long before the term Windrush came on the agenda.
Okay.
And do you all know how the Windrush scandal came about?
Yeah, could I ask you a question about that, please? If I'm right or wrong, you'll put me right. They just targeted Jamaicans, didn't they?
No, I wouldn't say that because
you're going to put me right.
No, that ship with 493 people also stopped in Trinidad and Grenada.
Okay.
So Jamaican that was on board. What happened? I used to work at the Home Office, and I used to go on the 13th floor when Angela Rumble was minister, and they did not know that there's 14 main Caribbean islands. They think everybody is from Jamaica. There was a lot of ignorance.
Yes. They still think that they only know one island.
No, but you can't disrespect my friends from the other Caribbean islands because most of them are proud of where they come from. And that's why I love the cricket, because the cricket been a unifying force. The cricket is a gel that have held the 14 Caribbean islands together, which is very important.
That's right.
So we shouldn't make people being divisive. But what the Home Office also did when I used to go there, they didn't understand the Asian languages, and we had 5 towns in Northampton, and they didn't realize that in Northampton you need Urdu language, in Wellingborough you need Gujarati, in Karbi you need Hinduism, and so on. A lot of ignorance, but they're still ignorant, because I also met Theresa May when I was director of the Race Equality and Human Rights Service in London, and I clashed with several of them at the Queen Elizabeth II Centre near the House of Commons a couple of times. I clashed with Baroness Warsay. It was only Theresa May that actually supported me one at a time. You see, so there's a lot of things that happen sometimes, but the Home Office is probably one of the worst departments of government. Most of the people that worked there when I was around, they were very ignorant about race and ethnicity.
Steve, we're going to let you go now, but thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for your service within the community.
Yeah, thank you. I've been struggling a bit. I got a bit of sore throat on the flu.
Yeah,
you done good. You done good.
Man Them Chat hopefully is going to be running until at least September 23. So we'd love to have you back again.
Yeah, well, the next time if people read the book, and then we can be more specific.
Yeah, brilliant.
I know I've generalized a lot, so I hope people got something from it.
Yeah, man, it was blessed, man. You've done a great work in the community. Luton, Bedford, Birmingham, Bristol.
Some people like to talk about the cricketers and the footballers, but I'm glad that we can have a general discussion without talking about celebrities.
We'd love you to come and do one on the cricket anyway. That's why not? It's not all.
Yeah, but remember with the cricket, for every one Chris Gale, there's another 10 that we help that didn't make it. Because when I was in Jamaica, I was interviewed on the radio, and the journalist said, there's 2 cricketers that didn't make it to the professional game. And I turned to them and I said, yes, but they made it as men. And they said, what do you mean they made it as men. And I said to him, they didn't end up in the criminal justice system. They both got a house and they both married and they're in gainful employment. So it's not just about the celeb. We got help a lot of guys, mentor a lot of guys who have come to this country from different Caribbean islands who have done well for themselves. And they're not celebrities, but I'm proud of them.
Amen.
Brilliant.
No, respect, man, respect.
Yeah.
All
Once
right,
again,
guys.
much appreciated. Thanks for everyone who turned up tonight.
Yeah, much appreciated, guys.